this video is going to help us review how to use a calculator to do our linear regression problems. So I've got an example here. I've got this table with the year and the enrollment. It could be for anything. I just got a table. And I'm going to answer 4 questions that pretty much do everything you're going to be asked to do on the calculator. So first I want to use the data and find the linear regression equation. And I'm going to round to the hundredths. So remember, your year and time is usually always going to be your independent variable, your x. And then the enrollment is going to be the y. Instead of typing in 1980, it'll usually be specific, but if it's not, I still recommend doing this. Pick a year to be your base year, your t equals 0. For this one, 1980 works good. So 1980 is my t equals 0. Okay, I usually pick a decade, the next decade below all of my years. This one starts on 1980. So if 1980 is 0, 1985 is 5. 90 would be 10, 95, 15, and 2020. And this is years since 1980, which is when my t equals 0. So to enter into your calculator, put the calculator here, you're going to go turn on, stat, edit, and L1 is going to be my x values, L2 is going to be the y values. So I've got 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. L2 is the y values, 14, 20, 22, 28, 37. So I've entered in my data. Now to find the actual regression equation, I'm going to go back to stat. I'm going to scroll over to calc, and I want to calculate the linear regression model. So I'm going to go to linreg. Press enter. For this calculator, it's an 83. I'm just going to press enter again. For the 84s, you scroll down to calculate and press enter. So now I know linear regression is ax plus b. All right, and it gives me a, it gives me b. So for this example, it would be 1.08x plus 13.4. So we got 1.08x plus 13.4. That's a pretty good, not a whole lot of rounding there. Let's make that worse. Alright, so now the steps, if you want to write them down, to enter in your data, you go to stat, and you're going to go to the first one, edit. And then your x values go in L1, your y values go in L2. Once you have your data entered, you're going to press stat. You're going to scroll over to calc. And the one that we want is number 4, linreg. Okay? I want to find the correlation coefficient. That's going to tell me if it's a good fit, and I want to graph it with my scatter plot. So if I go back to my calculator, all that this gives me right now is my y, a, and b. So y equals ax plus b gives me the a and the b to plug in. I have to turn on my diagnostic to get more information. So I'm going to go second 0 to get to the catalog. And this is alphabetical, so I can just scroll all the way down, and I'm looking for the D's, and I'm going to find diagnostic on. It's off, there's on. Press enter, enter, and it says done. Now I'm going to go back and do the same thing, stat calc linreg. And I've got y equals a, b, r squared, and r. That r is my correlation coefficient. So for this one, my correlation coefficient is 0.978. Now remember, your correlation coefficient can be between -1 and 1. You want it to be far from 0. Okay, so the closer it is to -1 or the closer it is to +1, the better fit your model is. This one's pretty close to +1. So yeah, I'd say it is a pretty good fit. Right? It's very close. Now to graph it with the scatter plot. It's not a bad habit when you turn the catalog or go to the catalog and turn diagnostic on to go ahead and turn a stat plot on too. So that's second y equals. I'm going to press enter for the first one, and I want this to be highlighted, not the R. So I'm just going to press enter to move it over. Now, if I go to my graph, I'm not going to see my points, or you might only see one point. To get your graph or your calculator to automatically adjust your window, we're going to go to zoom and go down to number 9. It says zoom stat. So that means it's going to automatically adjust my window, and there are my points. Now I want to graph that line with my points. So we've got a couple options. One, this one is nice and easy. I didn't have to round it, so I could just type this exact equation in and get the same thing. Okay, or if it is a nasty equation, a couple things to keep in mind. First, it has to be the very last thing we did. Right, so that's the last thing on my screen, so my calculator knows which one I want to paste. Go to y equals, bars, down to statistics, over to EQ, and I want that first one, regression equation. And it pastes the exact same thing in there. I didn't have to remember it or anything. Go to your graph, and you should see a pretty good fit. Right, it looks like it goes right down the middle. It's a good fit for my model. Okay, so if we come back here, we're going to jot those steps down. To find your correlation coefficient and to graph it, you got to turn on your stat plot and your diagnostic. Okay, so to turn your diagnostic on, we go second, 0, and then we're going to scroll down to diagnostic on. And then you press enter, enter. To turn on your stat plot, right, we go second, y equals, and you want to make sure that plot 1 is on. Okay, once you have all of that, to paste it, let's see, I'm going to erase that, 0.978, right off to the side in blue. All we said was 0.978. Alright. To paste into y equals, you go into y equals, you make sure that the last thing you did was find that regression model, and then you press vars, you go down to 5, statistics, you're going to scroll over to EQ, and then you want the first one, reg EQ. And it'll paste it in there for you. And another thing we looked at was just whenever you look at your window, you're going to go to zoom, and then we want number 9, zoom stat. Alright. Then we want to predict how many were enrolled in A, 1992, and in B, 2005. So remember, time, the years in this case, are my x values. If I know x, I can find y by plugging in x. But I'm not going to plug in 1992 because we said that t equals 0 was 1980. Well, 1992 is 12 years away from 1980, so I'm going to plug in 12. And then 2005 is 25 years from 1980, so I'm going to plug in 25. And we got a couple options the way of doing that. One, you can plug it in by hand. And 2, you can trace on your calculator. And 3, you can look at the table. Okay, so if I want to look at the table, we're going to go second, graph, to get to the table. And I'm just going to scroll down to 12. So to get to 12, it's 26.36. Which we might as well just say 26 enrolled. Okay, the other option is if you're looking at your graph to trace it. So if I press the trace button, I'm going to get X and Y on the bottom, and then top I've got P1, that means plot 1. I need that to say in my equation, because plot 1 is not going to tell me anything because I don't have 1992 in my table. So I'm going to scroll up or down, just so that it says Y1, and then I'm just going to type in, and we'll type in 25 this time. You're going to get an error. Okay, if you get an error, it's because that is not in your window right now. So I'm going to say quit, go back to my graph. If you look at your window, it says that my x max is 22. In order to plug in a value for x, it's got to be in that window. So I'm just going to change this to something bigger, like 30. It could be anything. Go back to my graph. Remember, as long as it's moving up here, it's still loading. Trace, up or down arrow to get Y1. Type in 25, and I get 40.4. So we'll say that 40 were enrolled in 2005. Okay, so for one option, We can go second graph to get to our table. In order to look at your table or do plug in the value, you have to have something into y equals. So you got to have whatever your linear regression equation is plugged into y equals. And then your second one is if you're looking at your graph, you press the trace button, and then you either do up or down, one of the arrows, and then you type in the x value. So whatever you want x to equal. And then the last type of question is, in what year did enrollment reach 30? Okay, so enrollment is our y value. So now I'm looking for x when I'm given my y. Okay, now 30 looks like it's between 1995 and 2000, but I don't know what year that is. Okay, so one option is doing it by hand, setting your equation equal to 30, plugging in 30 for y. And the other is anytime you're given y, anytime, go to y equals and put that in your y2. So my y2 is going to be 30. I'm going to go back to my graph, and you have a horizontal line that goes straight across. That is your horizontal line marking 30, which means that that intersection is where my equation equals 30. So I want to find the intersection. I'm going to go second trace, go down to intersect, number 5, and it's going to ask me first curve, second curve, guess. Your calculator is pretty good at picking it up, so I'm just going to go enter, enter, enter. So my intersection is at 15.3730. 15.3730. So T equals 15.37. All right, well, 15.37 away from 1980 would be 1995.37. Okay, so that means that it was probably in 1996 that it actually hit 30 people, or 30 of whatever is being enrolled. All right, and then my steps for that, we went to y equals, and we said y2 equals whatever that y value is, and then we looked at our graph. You might have to adjust your window, depending. You got to make sure you see that intersection in your window. Then we went to second trace. Second trace, and number 5, intersect. And then we just press enter, enter, enter 3 times. It's going to ask you those 3 questions. First curve, asking if that's the first one you want to look at. Second curve, and it's going to look at your second equation, and then it's going to say guess. And you say, yes, calculator, I do want you to guess, and you press enter. And that's pretty much all we're going to do on the calculator. It's a lot, but once you practice it and you get used to it, it takes you no time at all.